What's good? It's Woog. David Benavidez, 30 wins and 0 losses, will be defending his, since he's now been elevated to full WBC light heavyweight title, against Anthony Yarde, 27 wins and 3 losses. David Benavidez really is one of my favorite fighters in the sport. I just love his attitude and willingness to fight all of these tough fights, even when it's not super beneficial to do so. Like his last fight was against David Morrell, who nobody really wanted to go out of their way to fight. I know that Morrell struggled against Katayev afterwards, and so now we're kind of wondering, well, how good is David Morrell really? I mean, before Benavidez versus Morrell didn't look great against Hot Rod Kalajdzic, but David Benavidez at this point, and it's crazy that he's still only 28 years old, has beaten Demetrius Andrade, the only person, first and only person to beat Andrade, Caleb Plant, Gvozdyk, a former champion, former WBC light heavyweight champion, and David Morrell, as well as Anthony Durrell several years ago. So David Benavidez, now that he's been elevated to full WBC light heavyweight champ since Dmitry Bivol vacated after his win in the rematch against Artur Beterbiev, David Benavidez is now a 2-time 168-pound champion and now a light heavyweight champion. He's really stacking up that resume, and it's just a shame. And I'm not going to make this video about Canelo and Canelo not wanting to fight David Benavidez, but it was extremely frustrating seeing Canelo choose certain opponents and trying to get away or get around fighting David Benavidez. It was just one of the things that was most frustrating during that era, during that couple of years in boxing. Because after Canelo became undisputed champion at 168, his unfinished business in the division was David Benavidez. Now, David Benavidez wasn't one of the guys holding a title when Canelo stormed the gates, because he lost his title once on the scale against Romer at Alexis Angulo, and before that, he lost his WBC 168-pound title due to cocaine or testing positive for cocaine. So he's never been beaten, but he was stripped of his title twice. Therefore, he didn't have a belt when Canelo was on the mission to become undisputed. But I think that we were all hoping that after Canelo beat Caleb Plant, that at some point he would circle back and fight David Benavidez. And a lot of people think that Canelo was choosing a time or an opportunity to go after the 168-pound titleist when David Benavidez wasn't one of them. I'm not in that camp, but a lot of people think that that was a part of Canelo's timing in collecting those belts at 168. But David Benavidez was a boogeyman at 168. I don't know him to be a boogeyman at 175. Like, I don't think that Dmitry Bivol was necessarily ducking David Benavidez. I think that he just didn't want to defend his title soon. I mean, look at how he's kind of put off a trilogy fight against Artur Beterbiev. So I don't look at Dmitry Bivol as being like afraid of David Benavidez or anything like that. I mean, they were longtime sparring partners. And when I look at David Benavidez against Anthony Yarde, whose 3 losses were against Sergey Kovalev, when Kovalev wasn't in his prime, but was still really good, and Anthony Yarde was just maybe a punch or two away from stopping Kovalev. He hurt Kovalev badly in that fight. Kovalev was hanging on for a period there. Kovalev ended up stopping Anthony Yarde, which I thought was more exhaustion than I got hit so many times and so hard that I can't stand up anymore. It was a really grueling, drag out fight between Kovalev and Yarde. But yeah, I gave Yarde props for taking on the Crusher at that time. And his other 2 losses are against Lyndon Arthur, which he avenged via 4th round knockout and has since beaten Yarde a second time in their rubber match. And then Anthony Yarde's loss to Artur Beterbiev via 8th round TKO in a fight that I thought Anthony Yarde did pretty well in. He hurt Beterbiev a couple of times there. And that's one thing about Anthony Yarde. He's got hand speed. He's got a lot of power. Like, out of his 27 wins, 24 have come via knockout. So when I look at Benavidez versus Yarde, first of all, I'm looking at these lopsided odds, and I'm thinking, how are you going to make Benavidez a 9-1 favorite over Anthony Yarde? Again, Yarde's losses are against Kovalev, Lyndon Arthur, which he avenged twice now, and Artur Beterbiev. and you made Anthony Yarde a plus 650, a 6.5 to 1 underdog against Benavidez, whose only wins at 175 at light heavyweight have been against a post-prime, a few year retired, and then was on a comeback Alexander Gvozdyk, and against David Morrell, who himself had just come up to light heavyweight from 168. So to me, I like Benavidez. He, to me, was at 168 was one of the best fighters in the sport, but I don't see him as having truly proven himself as a light heavyweight elite just yet. So to make him this big of a favorite against an opponent who by far is the heaviest handed, hardest puncher that Benavidez will have faced, no doubt about it. To make him that big of a favorite is crazy. So from a betting standpoint, I would encourage anyone to put a little something on Anthony Yarde. I don't know yet if I'm going to bet at all on this fight, but I look at this as like, if I was to handicap this, I would make David Benavidez maybe a minus 250, minus 300, nowhere near where he is right now. Again, he hasn't demonstrated to me that he's truly a great light heavyweight. He was a great 168. Don't know about light heavy yet. And if you look at how scary of a puncher he was and how heavy-handed and how much he was just brutalizing people at 168, whether you're talking about his eventual stoppage against Anthony Durrell, the way that he just took over in the second half of the fight against Caleb Plant, or the way that he stopped Demetrius Andrade by the 6th round, dropped him in the 5th, stopped him in the 6th. That was like, whoa. And I know Demetrius Andrade had just come up from middleweight 160 to 168. And so Andrade himself just needed and wanted a big fight against an opponent that mattered for once in his career. And he got that. Unfortunately, it was against David Benavidez. But if you look at what David Benavidez was doing to people at 168, and then you look at how he's gone the distance twice at 175, he couldn't stop a way post-prime Alexander Gvozdyk, whereas Beterbiev stopped a prime Alexander Gvozdyk. So Benavidez is not Artur Beterbiev when it comes to the pressure at 175 and the hell that he raises at 175. Again, that's one of the guys that Anthony Yarde has lost to. So if you think that because Beterbiev beat Yarde that Benavidez can beat Yarde, no, I haven't seen that yet. Like, Benavidez at 175 isn't doing people like he did Kyron Davis and Ronald Ellis, where he was just swarming people with activity and was so much bigger than a lot of his opponents, and heavy-handed plus volume plus underrated defense was just getting these guys out of there. He was just a storm at 168. Not so much at 175 in terms of both his punching power nor his built-in size advantages. These guys are now about as big as him, and I don't know if he could take a big light heavyweight shot. Like, Gvozdyk to me didn't show what Benavidez is capable of against the elite, the cream of the crop in the division. And again, I'm still not convinced that David Morrell is going to be an elite light heavyweight. Whereas what we do know about Anthony Yarde is that you've got to be top tier to beat that guy. And I don't think that David Benavidez is as back foot, jab heavy, good of a boxer as Lyndon Arthur, at least not in Lyndon Arthur's style. Now, David Benavidez, I believe, is not only underrated in terms of his defense, but is an underrated boxer. And he's been, ever since he was 14, 15, 16, you could see pictures of him, having sparred with Triple G. He sparred again with Dimitri Bivol, Zurdo Ramirez. Like, David Benavidez came up in the game, like sparring all these, great fighters as a kid. So I don't look at him as just being a big weight bully who was formerly at 168. I look at him as actually being a pretty damn good boxer with actual skills. Sure, certain guys like Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Plant are able to win a couple of the early rounds against Benavidez, but once he starts rolling downhill, he's an absolute problem because his volume doesn't relent, and he starts walking forward on you, looking to jab low, throw the right hand low, starts to mix it up and starts to put his punches together. And he's a very accurate puncher. For as many punches as he throws, he knows where you're sometimes dipping. Like, look at the shot that changed the fight against Demetrius Andrade. David Benavidez is an accurate puncher. So yeah, he's an all-around problem. I just don't know how that's going to translate at 175. Even though he's already 2-0 at light heavyweight, I don't know where he is in the pecking order. So when you envision him against Yarde, how do you see him beating Yarde? Like, I don't think he's got a hand speed advantage against Yarde. He's got pretty quick hands and he throws more punches than Yarde, I'll say that. But Yarde, again, hurt Kovalev badly, stopped Lyndon Arthur, and hurt Beterbiev. So even the guys who have beaten Yarde have been hurt by Yarde. I don't see David Benavidez getting out of this one without being visibly hurt by Anthony Yarde, especially because of how much Benavidez likes to open up and how much volume is a part of his game. You can't get away with throwing a lot of punches at Yarde without that quick counter, whether it's a left hook, a straight right, without something hard and fast coming back at you. So how is Benavidez going to, close the distance? Again, it's not like he's going to be tall and with long arms out here and he's going to be fighting somebody like David Lemieux. You want to talk about a sad case. Look at what happened when David Lemieux got in the ring with David Benavidez. That was a mismatch and he just thrashed David Lemieux within a couple of rounds. And I think David Lemieux retired after that. That's not going to be the case here. Anthony Yarde is about the same height, at least on paper. And I've always been surprised by how David Benavidez's reach has been calculated. I remember seeing it like at 70 inches, 72 inches. Now it looks like they've readjusted that, at least on BoxRec, to where he's now listed at 6'2". He used to be, listed at 6'1" and even 6 flat. And I remember seeing him at a Gervonta Davis fight several years ago when he was supposed to fight Abner Mares. He ended up fighting Hugo Ruiz because Mares got hurt. I was so disappointed, but it was still a fun event to go to. But I remember seeing David Benavidez outside, kind of like in public, and it was before he was like a famous fighter. So this is before he beat like Anthony Durrell. But I knew who he was, and I'm like, man, that dude looks like he's about 6'3". But he was listed at 6 feet, 6'1", with a shorter reach than you would imagine. Now he's listed at 6'2" on BoxRec, 6'2" with a 74.5-inch reach. The reach still looks like it might not be what you would think it is, but it kind of adds up now. It's more accurate than I think it was before. But if you look at Benavidez facing off, face to face with Anthony Yarde, it looks like there's only like an inch or two difference between them. Let me know if you've seen different. But it's not like Benavidez is going to be towering over Anthony Yarde. So it's not like Yarde's going to like do a bunch to get in range. Because, as it stands, Benavidez isn't a super fleet of foot fighter. He's got good footwork positionally, but he's not flying all over the place. He's not super happy footed, just moving all around. So I don't think that Yarde's going to have too big a problem closing the gap. And again, Benavidez is going to be throwing punches. So if Benavidez is going to be throwing with some level of volume, there's no way he's not at big risk of getting hit with the hardest shots he's ever been hit with in a professional fight. So I think that that's what he's up against here. That's why I think that those odds are so crazy, because David Benavidez per punch, I don't think he'll have the power advantage. Again, he had a great punch at 168. I don't think he's got a great punch at light heavyweight. Anthony Yarde, we know, has a great punch at light heavyweight. So Benavidez won't have the per punching power advantage. And I don't think he's got the hand speed advantage. So he's going to have to put his punches together in higher quantities, and he's got to box really well and be super defensively responsible. That's a lot of boxes to have to check against a guy, again, as quick and as powerful, as dangerous as Anthony Yarde. So here's how I see this one going. I think that Anthony Yarde is actually going to have some early success, and he might even drop Benavidez early. I think he's going to be winning some early rounds here. Like, again, a lot of Benavidez opponents have won early rounds against him. So through 5-6 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Anthony Yarde up 3 rounds to 2, 4 rounds to 2. But I do think, not in the same way that Benavidez was able to do it against Andrade and Caleb Plant, but I do think that as Yarde kind of tires in the later rounds, he does tend to slow down his activity, and his punching power, I believe, reduces in the later rounds. I think that that's when Benavidez is just going to put some volume on him and start to overwhelm him with activity. Again, I don't think he's going to blow him out in the second half, and I think Yarde will still be dangerous in the second half. But I think that that's when Benavidez's boxing, his cardio, his volume are going to start turning the tide. I think that David Benavidez will ultimately, again, I expect him to get buzz, at least buzz in this fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets dropped. But I think that even though I expect Yarde to be up after 5, even 6 rounds, I think that Benavidez is going to start winning more rounds in the second half of the fight. The question is which round is he going to start turning this thing around? Because again, Benavidez isn't going to be able to just come forward and get ultra aggressive against Yarde like he has against other opponents. I just think that the threat level is so much greater in this fight. So he's got to take his time here. The question is, how many rounds is he going to be giving up in getting into a flow, or before he gets into a flow? And even when he gets into a flow, again, he's got to be careful with what's coming back. It's not like Yarde just lets people take off on him without throwing meaningful punches in return. This is going to be a really tough fight for David Benavidez. I wouldn't be surprised if Yarde even wins this fight by decision or by stoppage. It's not like Yarde only has a puncher's chance. And I think that that's what people are kind of giving him, a puncher's chance. I think that because he might have a hand speed advantage, that he might be able to hurt Benavidez, get his respect, and then Benavidez is going to have to start questioning how he's going to enter these exchanges, how he's going to enter the pocket. But I do think that through working the body, through jabbing, and through using volume over time, he's going to be able to start to tire Anthony Yarde out. And I do think that he's going to be able to outbox Anthony Yarde through the second half of the fight. I'm expecting David Benavidez. Again, this could really go either way. Again, I told you how I would handicap it in terms of the odds here, but I'm going to go with David Benavidez to win this one, but I'm going to go with him to win it via decision. And I don't think it's going to be like a super obvious decision. I think this is going to be a fight that when it goes to the scorecard, it might be a question of who won this fight. It might be a 7 rounds to 5 type of fight. It might even be like a split decision, majority decision type of win for David Benavidez. But I think he'll do just enough to win enough rounds, again, through his volume and through his boxing ability, to where like rounds 9 through 12, he's just throwing more punches than Yarde. And Yarde is more so looking for big punches later on in the fight, but isn't able to match his volume. Therefore, Benavidez is going to be controlling majority of the 3 minutes in those later rounds. So I think Benavidez is going to win a really tight, close decision against Anthony Yarde here to retain his newly earned, because again, he's elevated to full WBC light heavyweight champ. I think David Benavidez is going to successfully defend his title via decision against, again, a very good quality fighter in Anthony Yarde. And once he does that, you got to start wondering, like, what does David Benavidez then have to do to become a Hall of Famer? Again, at this stage of his career, he's still 28. He's now a 2-division champion. And you start looking at some of the names on his resume, you have to start saying like, damn, okay, he's really kind of getting up there. We'll see what the future holds. I don't think that he will be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame, even with a win over Anthony Yarde, but he is still on that path. And I would like to see him fight, either Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol. I would rather actually see him fight Beterbiev than Bivol. I just think that it would be a funner fight, and I think Bivol actually outboxes Benavidez. Like, I feel more certain that Bivol beats Benavidez than I am that Beterbiev beats Benavidez. But yeah, I'm not even entirely convinced that Benavidez beats Anthony Yarde, but I'm going to pick him here, and I'm going to pick him to win again via close decision. If he stops Anthony Yarde, that will probably be, I think that will be the most significant achievement of his career, followed by probably the win against Caleb Plant, followed by either the win against Demetrius Andrade or Anthony Durrell. Now, the win against David Morrell, can age well depending on what David Morrell is able to do with his career going forward. That could be one of those wins that age well over time, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm taking Benavidez via close decision against Anthony Yarde. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if Yarde visibly hurts Benavidez or even wins the fight. Although, again, I'm taking Benavidez. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. I like this fight. I like this whole fight card. Check out some of the other previews that I did on Brian Norman Jr. versus Devin Haney and Abdullah Mason versus Sam Noakes for that vacant WBO lightweight title. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. And I would like to do a live this week. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.